LSU football is in the middle of a developmental bye week before beginning a 7-game SEC stretch that will no doubt determine the success and or lack thereof its season. Meanwhile, LSU's next opponent, now number 12, Ole Miss, finds itself facing off against South Carolina in Columbia, coming off a shocking 20-17 loss to Kentucky last weekend. South Carolina blew out Kentucky 31-6 1 week before barely losing to LSU in Columbia. Since the schedules were released, the game between Ole Miss and LSU on October 12th in Tiger Stadium was expected to be the first true test for the Tigers this season. But LSU fans are now more optimistic than ever that the Tigers can whip the Rebels following Ole Miss's upset loss to Kentucky last Saturday in Oxford. So what happened to Ole Miss last weekend? After a quick word from our sponsors, we'll hear from Michael Katz, reporter for the Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal and Ole Miss beat writer, as he breaks down what happened to Kiffin's kids against Kentucky with the Tiger Rag Radio crew, and Katz provides a glimpse into the Rebels' collective psyche. I'm your host, Jade McMains, and we'll be back right after this.
Hi, I'm Mike Munderland, and we're here to smash the capital city's trash.
Smash My Trash is a revolutionary compactor for large dumpsters, sometimes reducing the volume of waste by up to 70%. This means fewer hauls per month and big savings for your business. Fewer hauls and compacted waste will also result in a positive impact on our community and our environment by taking up less space in our local landfill sites. Schedule your company's free demo today. Call 225-497-0101.
Y'all ready? Let's go. Come on.
Tiger Rag Radio is on the air.
Let's crank this thing up.
We're statewide, breaking down the latest happenings with LSU athletics.
This is us.
Hear from the coaches.
Put together a defense that puts us in a position to win the SEC.
The players.
Having fun and we working, baby. That's it, man.
The recruits.
Show some passion and some heart.
And those who cover the Fighting Tigers of LSU and the SEC.
All those things are going to be there, which are important.
It's 2 hours of nonstop LSU talk.
What a privilege. I mean, you get to represent LSU.
Tiger Rag Radio is brought to you by Cummins. Cummins creates power solutions that the world depends on. Helm Paint and Decorating. The paint experts of Louisiana. Louisiana Beef Industry Council. Max Home. And the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Get ready to talk Tigers with producer Jackson Blackman and our hosts, Todd Horn and Jeff Palermo.
Three great players that are better people than they are players.
This is Tiger Rag Radio.
Friends, let's talk about Ole Miss. That's the Tigers' next opponent. And here to help us break down the Rebels and explain what might have happened last Saturday in Oxford, where the Ole Miss Rebels were upset by Kentucky, Michael Katz, who covers the Rebels for the Northeast Mississippi Journal. He joins us on Tiger Rag Radio. Michael, thanks a lot for spending some time with us tonight. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm not sure if I'm going to have the answer for what happened over the weekend, but I'll try my best.
Well, yeah, I was going to give you just kind of an open-ended question. And by the way, Michael joins us on the Max Home Hotline, over 50,000 Max Happy homeowners and counting. And really, it was going to be a question like, what the heck did happen against Kentucky?
Well, let's make it a little simpler.
Okay.
Is Kentucky's defense, especially their defensive line, as impressive in person as they were on TV on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing is that, you know, Ole Miss's numbers through the first 4 games were insane. But that's going to happen when you play the teams that they had played. They were superior in all parts. There was not a position group where they were outmanned in any of the first 4 games. And they came into the Kentucky game, and this is sort of a question that I think some of us had was, you know, we know that their defensive line, they loaded up on that in the offseason. Ole Miss did. And they did add some players on the offensive line, but the question was, is it going to be enough against these really good defensive lines? So Kentucky was really that first test of, you know, what are they made of up front on the offensive line, especially up the middle where they've got, you know, number 0 is like 340 pounds. He's a first-team All-SEC guy. He is insanely good. They've got the former Georgia linebacker back there who was making plays too. I think what we learned is that, yes, Kentucky's defensive line is extremely good. They are a typical Mark Stoops defense. They're tough. They're sound. They don't beat themselves. They don't commit penalties. And they're going to bully you. And that was sort of, I think, the game Ole Miss probably didn't want to get into. You know, I know time of possession doesn't mean a lot for Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin has said that. In a perfect world, they're scoring fast. But when Kentucky has the ball for 40 minutes and has almost the same amount of yardage as Ole Miss, something's kind of gone wrong for Ole Miss. And really, they could just never, establish anything consistently. The first drive of the game, Ole Miss drove 83 yards in less than 2 minutes, and it was like, okay, here it goes again. And they just never got that back. And I think that Kentucky really just punched them in the mouth in a way that Ole Miss, frankly, hadn't seen this year, and I think they're going to get punched again. But I think Kentucky's defensive line specifically was a really tough challenge because of what they had in the middle.
Talking to Michael Katz from Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal here on Tiger Egg Radio. Michael, how was Lane Kiffin after the game? Did he look like he was punched in the mouth a little bit? Was he a little bit surprised, or what was his demeanor in the post-game press conference?
I think surprised is a good word. Again, baffled I think is a little bit too strong, and Lane is very. I think I've really only seen him not be composed after a loss once, and it was 2022 after they lost to Alabama at home in that game that they probably should have won.
Oh, that was a great game, yeah.
Yeah, and that was that season sort of fell apart after that game, and that was really the only time I've seen Lane.
And they weren't supposed to be a great team that year, whereas this year they are.
Yeah, and so I think Lane is very he's very good at he's not an overly emotional guy. I think we all know that, but he's also very good at sort of putting things into the scope of an entire season. And I think his biggest message, to everybody, fans, boosters, everybody, was that it's one game, but like that doesn't necessarily mean you sound the alarm. If you win that game 20-17, are you having the same conversation as if when you lose that game 17-20? Not much different happened. It means you made another kick and they didn't. And so I think the biggest thing for him was not overreacting, and he's usually pretty good about that. Now, I will say, some of the players took it really, really hard. Quarterback Jackson Dart was, he's a very positive person, and he looked pretty stunned after that. But for the most part, Lane was kind of what you expect. He was very composed for the most part.
Trains are everywhere. You should always expect one, even on private property. Only cross tracks at designated crossings that fit your equipment. If you don't fit, don't commit. Look, listen, live.
Michael Katz is our guest on the Max Home Hotline. Over 50,000 Max homeowners and counting. Michael covers the Ole Miss Rebels for the Northeast Mississippi Journal. What did you think of Jackson Dart's performance in that game, Michael? Obviously, they didn't score enough points, but you just there's a lot of hype for a guy like this, and it just didn't. He just wasn't able to come through there in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that, again, you look at those first four games, he was putting up just absurd numbers against competition that was extremely outmanned. And, his numbers were fine. I think he was 18 of 27 for 261 yards and a touchdown. But, some of the throws that we had seen him make for the first four games, they just seemed a little bit off, a little bit too far, just a little bit out of reach of guys. Some guys had some drops. He just didn't look quite as sharp as, we were used to. And one of the things that Ole Miss had done really well all year was converting, not settling for field goals for the most part, was scoring touchdowns. And, Ole Miss goes at this tempo that is so fast that, before you know it, you can be down 14-0. And they were never able to get that lead and, let those pass rushers kind of get going and unleash the havoc that I think in a perfect world they want. But, Jackson at the end, though, he almost pulled that one out with, that fourth down play, 4th and 11, I think it was. He throws a 42-yard ball to Caden Prescore to keep the drive alive, and they end up in field goal range. And, of course, that kick goes wide. But, he gave them a chance, and I think Jackson is going to give them a chance in every game. But I think that, it was obvious it was not his best game, and I think he would be the first to tell you that as well.
Michael, do you think that he went from just being off perhaps to getting rattled at certain points of that game because they weren't able to do the things that he thought they were going to be able to do?
I mean, I don't know if I'd say rattled, but I think frustrated would probably be fair. Again, this has been a team that had not struggled at all in the first 4 games. Their numbers coming in were ridiculous. I think the fewest they had scored was like 40 or something like that. And then you go into a game where nothing's going right outside of that first drive. I think, it's one of those moments where, you never know like what's going to happen when adversity hits a team for the first time. And I think you always think you're ready. But then it sometimes hits you at moments when you weren't expecting it. And sometimes it just doesn't always go the way that they thought it would. And, I know that Jackson's a competitor, and I remember before the first game, he said the thing he was looking forward to was, how does this team handle adversity?
Right.
I don't think this team handled it very well, and I think Jackson, he was flustered. He was frustrated. Again, you've been averaging, 60 points a game, and you can't break 17. And this was supposed to be one of the easy games on your SEC schedule. You were 15.5-point favorites, and I know that doesn't really mean anything in the SEC, but I think it was eye-opening for him and for a lot of people on the team that this is going to be a lot harder than, it looked the first month.
It's time to start betting on yourself. Louisiana 988 can help if you're dealing with tough emotions caused by gambling habits. You can share as much or as little as you want, and it's completely confidential. It's free, available 24/7, and most people who reach out report feeling better right in the moment. Call or text 988 anytime.
Do you think that he was sitting there at some point during the game being so frustrated that they weren't able to combat the adversity the way he had hoped they would, and he just started feeling guilty because he thought he was going to be responsible for Kiffin leaving to go to Florida?
I'm not having that conversation. But I will say, I think that, again, was it the perfect offensive game plan? Probably not. If it had been a we have seen Lane and Charlie Weiss Jr. call masterful offensive games. The game that they had in the Peach Bowl against Penn State, that was a masterpiece. And when we've seen the masterpieces, and this was definitely not one of them. I think part of it, though, was, it's one thing if, your quarterback is off by a few yards on your throws, but your receivers are getting wide open and you're going to hit them again. This was one of those games where Kentucky is just so physical that they were throwing them off their routes. They were not able to get that push up front in the running game that, they had been able to get for the first 4 games. And I think that when you put all those things together, I think it was just sort of a group frustration of why is this thing that has worked so well not working now? And
old school beat new school, Michael. That's what happened.
Yep,
I think.
Absolutely. 100%. Kentucky wants to play ugly. And if you're not ready to play ugly, it's going to be a long day.
Hey, Michael, how do you see them bounce back against South Carolina?
I'll tell you, this is I'm not an overly headlining or dramatic person, but honestly, this feels like a defining moment in their season, because if you're 0-2 in the SEC heading to LSU, what if you're 0-3 heading into your bye week? How do you bounce back from that? I don't think anyone was expecting. I'm sure some people were, but I don't think anyone was expecting Ole Miss to go fully unscathed through their schedule. But, you were looking at games, which ones are the right ones to lose. Kentucky was a tough one, so I think that they really need the South Carolina game. I think they're going to bounce back. I do trust leadership on the team, but it should be entertaining, to say the least. It always is.
Facing another good defensive line on Saturday. Garrett Nussmeier would be able to testify to that. But, Michael, thanks a lot for breaking down the Ole Miss at this moment. Still should be a fantastic game. on October 12th between the Tigers and Rebels. Look forward to seeing you in Tiger Stadium.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me.
Have we got a September for you? Your East Baton Rouge Parish Library has 3 opportunities to meet author Jerry Pallotta, famous children's book author of Who Would Win? See art by Clementine Hunter and enjoy the sounds of the Baton Rouge Concert Band. These are just a few of the special things happening in September with your EBR library. Details are at ebrpl.com. That's ebrpl.com.
All right, that'll be it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Michael Katz, Jeff, Todd, and Glenn for the discussion. We'll be back later this week, but until then, stay tuned to TigerRag.com for all your latest LSU sports news.